Hmm. Okay. Let's see. This is something I keep finding not many people know about. And we might as well start bringing up these topics now that it's kind of hot at the moment. Tikkun Olam, repair of the world, is a concept in Judaism interpreted in Orthodox Judaism as the prospect of overcoming all forms of idolatry by other Jewish denominations as an aspiration to behave and act constructively and beneficially. Documented use of the term dates back to the Mishnaic period. Since medieval times, Kabbalistic literature has broadened use of the term. In the modern era, among the post Hashkalah Ashkenazi movements, Tikkun Olam is the idea that the Jews bear responsibility not only for their own moral, spiritual, and material welfare, but also for the welfare of society at large. To the ears of contemporary pluralistic rabbis, the term connotes the establishment of godly qualities throughout the world. History. The phrase Tikkun Olam is included in the Alienu, part of Jewish congregation prayer. The Alienu beseeches God, it has it here in Hebrew, to speedily see your mighty splendor, to remove detestable idolatry from the land, and the false gods will be utterly cut off, to Taken Olam, in God's kingdom. In other words, when all the people of the world abandon false gods and recognize God, the world will have been perfected. Being that we share a partnership with God, humanity is instructed to take the steps toward improving the state of the world and helping others, which simultaneously brings more honor to God's sovereignty. Some scholars, however, argue that the phrase in the Alienu is actually not a valid source for the concept of Tikkun Olam, and that the confusion arises because of the homonym Taken, spelled differently. Okay, Lamed Tav Kop Nun. Okay, meaning to establish rather than to fix or to repair. There are many sources where the reading, again, same word, they're not printing the vowel marks, so the jots and tittles, survives today. This section of Alienu is fundamentally a prayer for the establishment of God's kingdom, and therefore the reading of Lataken fits much better and makes more sense. If so, the meaning of the phrase is something like to establish God's sovereignty over the world. The meaning of the term in the Talmud is to make a decree that makes a difficult obligation easier. It is normally unrelated to the more eschatological usage. Okay, actually, let me make sure I kind of touch on this. To make a decree that makes a difficult obligation easier. Okay, if you are feeling angry, why don't you have something to eat? You know this joke? Like, oh, the guy walks in, he's like, oh, mom, and my boss, and you just won't even believe what happened. And he'd say, oh, why don't you just sit down and have something to eat? Because you're about to say something bad. It's better that you take delight in something you must do. You must eat. You have a human form. You will feel appreciation. You'll feel good. You will have delight. All delight truly has one source. Hopefully, you will remember the source of the delight you now have, and you will forget that which you will forget those who are indebted to you. Forgive me for my debts as I forgive my debtors. You give me bread every day. This is, that's where we get there's the roots of it. And now what I'm citing is from something I was reading last night about. I read a lot about Judaism. The American Conservative Movement's prayer book, Sidur Sim Shalom, published by the Rabbinical Assembly and the United States Synagogue of Conservative Judaism. A prayer for our country includes the verses, "May citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony to banish all hatred and bigotry, and uniting all people in peace and freedom, and helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore." Both lines express wholeheartedly the idea of universal equality, freedom, and peace for all. The Mi Sheberach prayer blesses all of those who are ill and are in need of healing. The 1975 New Union American Reform Movement's prayer book, Gates of Prayer, includes the text, "You, Lord, have taught us to uphold the falling, to heal the sick, to free the captive, to comfort all who suffer pain." From Lurianic Kabbalah, dwells on the role of prayer and ritual in Tikkun Olam. According to this vision, this is now, some of you, this is going to activate some almonds here. The role of prayer and ritual in the reparation of the world, Tikkun Olam. According to this vision of the world, God contracted part of God's self into vessels of light, partly limiting himself to create the world. These vessels shattered, and their shards became sparks of light trapped within the material of creation. Prayer, especially contemplation of various aspects of the divinity, Sephirot, releases these sparks of God's self and allows them to reunite with God's essence, bringing them closer to a fixed world. According to Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, in his book Derech Hashem, the physical world is connected to spiritual realms above that influence the physical world, and furthermore, Jews have the ability through physical deeds and free will to direct and control these spiritual forces. God's desire in creation was that God's creation ultimately will recognize God's unity and overcome evil. This will constitute the perfection, Tikkun, of creation. While the Jews have the Torah now and are aware of God's unity, some believe that when all of humanity recognizes this fact, the rectification will be complete. In recent years, Jewish thinkers and activists have used Lurianic Kabbalah to elevate the full range of ethical and ritual mitzvot into acts of Tikkun Olam. These Jews believe that not only does prayer lift up divine sparks, this is what I was taught actually in my class, so do all of the mitzvot, including those traditionally understood as ethical. Yes, okay, that's actually, I like the way that that's put, because it's interesting, because the rabbi had to put it a different way. The application of the Lurianic vision to improving the world can be seen in Jewish blogs, high holiday sermons, and online Jewish learning resource centers, and they have a number of links. The association between Lurianic conception of Tikkun Olam and ethical action assigns an ultimate significance to even small acts of kindness and small improvements of social policy. However, this association can be a double-edged sword and has begun to trigger critique even within the social justice community. Interesting. On one hand, seeing each action as raising a divine spark can motivate people to action by giving them hope that their actions will have long-term value. On the other hand, if this is done in a manner that separates the concept of Tikkun Olam from its other meanings, as found in rabbinic literature and the Alienu prayer, the risk of privileging actions that have no real significance and represent personal agendas is introduced. That's very well put. The application of Lurianic Kabbalah to ethical mitzvot and social action is particularly striking when Lurianic Kabbalah saw itself as repairing God and the world to come, rather than this world and its social relations. Author Lawrence Fine points to two features of Lurianic Kabbalah that have made it adaptable to ethical mitzvot and social action. First, he points out that a generation recovering from the tragedy of the Holocaust resonates with the imagery of shattered vessels. Second, both Lurianic Kabbalah and ethical understandings of Tikkun Olam emphasize the role of human responsibility in action. All right, so from here it goes on to specifically what are mitzvot and the various mitzvot, and or sort of. But another category of this, building a model society. That's actually the philosophies of Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch and Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook are prominent in this field. The former rationally and in terms of Kehillah, community, of Jews in Galut, the diaspora, influencing their non-Jewish neighbors, and the latter mystically and in Zionist terms of a Jewish state influencing the other nations of the world. Some other Orthodox rabbis, many but not all of them modern Orthodox, follow a philosophy similar to Hirsch's, including Joseph H. Hertz, Isidore Epstein, know that name, and Eliezer Berkovitz. Philosophy of religious Zionism follows Cook in his philosophy. In modern Orthodox philosophy, which often is intertwined with religious Zionism, especially in America, it is commonly believed that mitzvot have practical, this worldly, sociological, and educational effects on those who perform them, and in this manner the mitzvot will perfect the Jews and the world. According to this rationalist philosophy of Hirsch and others, the social and ethical mitzvot have nearly self-explanatory purposes, while ritual mitzvot may serve functions such as educating people or developing relationships between people and God. As examples, prayer either inculcates a relationship between people and God or strengthens beliefs and faith of the one who prays. And keeping kosher and wearing tzitzit serve as educational symbols of moral and religious values. Thus, the ultimate goal of mitzvot is for moral and religious values and deeds to permeate the Jewish people and ultimately the entire world. But the ritual mitzvot, nevertheless, play a vital role in this model of Tikkun Olam, strengthening what is accomplished by the ethical. Hirsch's Horeb is an especially important source, as his exposition of his philosophy of the mitzvot. He classifies the mitzvot into 6 categories. 1. Toroth, philosophical doctrines. The ethical mitzvot fall under 2. Mishpatim, 3. Hukim, commandments of justice towards living people and the natural world, including the human body itself, respectively. And 4. Mitzvot, commandments of love. The ritual mitzvot under 5. Edot, educational symbolic commandments, and 6. Avodah, the commandments of direct service to God. Aside from the fact that by perfecting themselves the Jews set an example for the rest of the world, there is thus the additional distinction that mitzvot have practical worldly effects. For example, charity benefits the poor materially, constituting Tikkun Olam by its improvement of the world physically or socially, in contrast to the mystical effects of mitzvot as held by Lurianic Kabbalah. Yeah, there. I think, so that is Tikkun. This is a very, very important teaching, and I actually even have found it difficult to find in the books I have. This term, I have not found this in the, I believe in Gershom Scholem's Kabbalah. I could not find it in there. I couldn't find, like, to go to the index and find, like, a really good example of it throughout the book. Also, Birnbaum, right? Buxbaum's Jewish spiritual practices. Couldn't find Tikkun Olam. Probably it's in there somewhere. I would just have to look around. I'd have to look at the Elianu, apparently. But this is a very important idea. And people who are familiar with Christianity and stuff, they'll be like, you know, this does kind of sound sort of like things I've heard in various churches. Yeah. Well, it's yeah, and so I just thought I'd put that out there because I think there is a lack of knowledge about this worldview that does become a very important part of especially the spreading of socialism. Um, and this is really one of these things of it is what it is, for better or for worse. Because remember, there's people even in to this right now. There's a huge portion of Christendom that has bought into the idea of like Jesus as some kind of anarchist who is, wanted to do wild and crazy political implications of moral ideas and religious ideas that don't that you kind of end up at a certain stage of your life realizing that that doesn't really matter. It matters about it's me, my relationship with others, my relationship with the divine, and then the rest of it you just got to kind of hope you're a good example to others. But this also comes from the idea of you are the light of the world, and may your lights shine before men. So just thought I would put that out there. All right, later.